This month was a roller coaster ride for books. Hi everyone, my name is Maddie and welcome back to my channel, or thanks for joining us if you're new here. My hands are currently killing me because I've decided to get back into playing fiddle, which it's wild to think that I've technically been playing for 13 years now, but I haven't been playing as much recently and I want to get back up to where I was before. Except I forgot when you don't play multiple times a week, you lose your calluses and the muscles you build up, and now everything hurts. So instead I'm taking a break by rambling to you. So in September I participated in the Magical Readathon, and I have to say, for all the books that I picked out, like how excited I was about them, I'm a little disappointed with what happened. It was all over the place. Like, we have a couple 5-star reads, and then we'll have some reads that are like as low as half a star. So definitely a different collection of items that we're going to be going through here. I realized I think I have a physical book for every book that I've read this month, which it's been a while since I've done that. So the very first book that I read was the Graveyard book by Neil Gaiman. It follows Bod, who is, I was gonna say born in a cemetery. He was not born in a cemetery. His parents are murdered and he ends up in the cemetery, and the ghosts who inhabit the cemetery decide to raise him and to like keep him safe, but meanwhile the person who killed his family is still like out looking for him. It's Neil Gaiman. Of course, it was a good book. I gave it 4.75 stars just because I really wish that there was more relationship building between Bod and his like adopted ghost parents, because they weren't really present. But I think his name it's Silas, who is kind of this in-between type creature who's like not really a ghost but not really alive, who's like takes over as being Bod's like guardian and helps like get him food and things that his ghost parents can't do because they can't leave the graveyard. The relationship building between them was incredible, but I would have liked a little bit more from some of those other secondary characters as well. The book does a really good job with pace, considering that it like spans the entirety of Bod's life, from when he's like a baby to like eventually what happens at the end and what decisions he decides to make. And that was something that I really liked about this book, is even though the ending made me really sad, I think it's something that we don't see a lot in literature in terms of like moving on and forward and like self-discovery, and I think that's a really good message to have in a book that is directed toward teens. I have to say, I don't know if there's too many books that I've read by Neil Gaiman that I don't like. I don't think there is any that I can think of off the top of my head. The only one is I read M is for Magic, which is a short story collection, and I liked some of them but didn't like others. But in particular, Neil Gaiman's YA, love it. Stardust, incredible. Coraline, incredible. Graveyard book, incredible. Would definitely recommend you check it out. After that, I read Circe, which is by Madeline Miller, who wrote the Song of Achilles, and this is about the Greek goddess Circe, who kind of falls in love with mortals and finds out that she has the power of witchcraft, which gets her banished to this island completely by herself, and it essentially follows like her, can I use the word life if she's immortal? I guess her life and her banishment and her time out on this island. I definitely think that Song of Achilles is my favorite of the two novels. The thing that I found in this book, and part of the reason I only gave it 4 stars, was it was really wandering at some points in time. Like, sometimes you're just kind of like following what's happening in her life, which is fine, but it also meant that I didn't feel like I had a good grasp on where the story was going, where it was taking me, and like what was the conflict, what was I looking for, what was going to be happening next. There is some actually like really little nice like Easter egg tie-ins to the Song of Achilles. I guess they're not really Easter eggs, but just kind of the way that certain characters get talked about, and you're just like, Achilles and Patroclus. I love them so much. They're my whole heart. I also still don't know if it's Patroclus or Patroclus. I should really look into that, because Lord knows, as much as I love that book, I'm gonna be fucking it up all the time. I've also spent this whole month putting this special edition copy of the Song of Achilles into a basket from Waterstones and then taking it out again. And I really should just order it because I love that book so much. But that's not what I'm supposed to be talking about. I'm supposed to be talking about this book. Yeah, I think Circe was a really interesting character, and definitely like the reclamation of that story was really interesting, especially too because it's a goddess that I don't know a lot about, despite my knowledge of Greek mythology, and there was a lot of overlap with other characters, other people in mythology that I was able to be like, oh, okay, I'm putting the pieces together. I understand how this works now. But yeah, it really came together at the end, and Madeline Miller has just this really solid writing style is the only word that I can think for it. It's like, it's so consistent, it's so grounding that even though sometimes I feel like if it was written by a different author, I might have got lost in some of that like wandering, meandering storyline. I didn't get lost because the gorgeousness of the writing was able to help pull me through the rest of the book. I might do like a full review on it. I haven't decided if I want to do a spread on it in my bullet journal. I'm also trying to debate if I should like split this channel so that my bullet journal stuff is on a separate channel. If you have thoughts about that, let me know. I'd be curious to hear what you're thinking. But yes, that was the second book. So we have a 4.7 stars, we have 4 stars, and then I'm not sure, is this where it starts to get dicey or do we have a little bit more? No, we have another 5-star. Okay. So it starts off real good. And then it gets dicey, I guess, is what happened. The 5-star read was Where We Go From Here, which is by Lucas Rocha, and he's a Brazilian author, and this book has been translated into English. I've been dying to read it for forever. I got it at like 11 a.m. in the morning, and I had finished it by 11 p.m. at night the same day. So, you know, that's for buying books. But I also just really want to appreciate like the cool neonness of this cover. This is another one that I want to make a spread for. I just haven't figured out whether black paper or painting it black is going to work. And then I have some neon Sharpies. So I'll probably do a full review of this one as well. But it follows Ian, Victor, and Henrique. That's not Enrique. That's how you say it. Look at me understanding how Portuguese works. My brain was like Henrique, and I'm like, that's not, the H's aren't really a thing. Enrique, that's how you say that name. Anyways, shutting up now. Well, not, but talking about what I'm supposed to be talking about. So, Ian has just tested positive for HIV, and he doesn't know what to do because his whole life's kind of been changed. And Victor, who Ian has met at the testing center, has just got tested for HIV, but it comes back negative. However, his boyfriend, maybe not boyfriend anymore because he didn't disclose their status until after they had sex, even though he did everything in his power to make sure that like it wouldn't be transmitted. So he's undetectable, but still Victor is really upset that he didn't disclose this to him until after they had sex, and he doesn't really know if he still wants to be in a relationship with him, but he still offers to Ian that he can hook him up with Enrique so that they can talk to each other and maybe he can provide him some support since he's been living with this diagnosis for 3 years. It's a really credible book. It was really interesting for me to learn more about the healthcare system in Brazil because I don't know much about it and like what their approach is to dealing with like HIV and AIDS. And it sounds incredible to me. I was like, damn, what? I feel like especially because I have a very state-centric view of it, just because the States being the States is in all the media. Like, I don't even really know much about the Canadian view of it. I'm probably going to be writing about 2 boys kissing and doing a lot of research on AIDS for my thesis, so this was something that was really interesting to me. Especially, I don't think there's a lot of literature that's set after the AIDS crisis and deals with like modern life of what it is to live with HIV, and I think this book did a really incredible job of that. It also does a really good job at like walking the lines of stigma in a certain way. I think Victor's character in particular is really interesting because he's so angry at Enrique and he can't articulate why. It's kind of like, he lied to me, you know, he risked my life, he did all of these things that he shouldn't have done. And Lucas Rocha does just such a great job of not making you hate Victor, but like making you kind of like understand that the way that the culture that we live in and the things that we are socialized in get like inbred into us, and Victor has this kind of internalized prejudice that he's trying to work his way through and is kind of acting as a blockade for his love and his want to be in a relationship with Enrique, and the way that that too impacts Enrique in this relationship but also in past relationships as well. Overall, just a really incredible book. It was also super cool when I was reading the acknowledgements of this book that I found out that the author of one of my favorite books, David Leviathan, who wrote 2 Boys Kissing, actually brought the Portuguese version of this over from Brazil and like gave it to his publisher and was like, we need to get an American version of this, and now it exists, so that's so cool. But yes, after reading that lovely, lovely 5-star, I had absolute whiplash because I read What We Don't Talk About, and the prompt that I picked this one for was a 5-star like prediction, and I gave this half a star. I think that is the lowest I've ever rated a book, but also I was on Goodreads before, and Goodreads only lets you go to 1 star, and now I'm using Storycraft where you can use half and quarter stars. I'm really disappointed because this book was on my TBR for forever. It sounded so great, like Alice Oseman had recommended it. I had seen so many different people saying it was a really good story, and it just angered me. Like, the visceral anger that I felt after finishing this book was was a lot. So it follows Farai, who is in a relationship with this boy, Adam, and Farai is black. I believe her family is from Zimbabwe, and Adam is white. His family's British. And they have been in a relationship for 2 years, but she's never met his parents. And she's going to meet his parents, and his parents are not great people. They're racist. Just gonna be blunt about that. The way that the book is depicted in, like, the back and in online is that it's the, you know, dealing with the complexities of interracial relationships, and I got this sense of, like, overcoming it and, like, having open dialogues and conversations, and that is not what happens at all. I think that was the thing that was so frustrating to me, was that Adam had no voice in the narrative. And I understand that this is Farai's story and it's her, like, experience as a black woman experiencing racism and how that impacts her relationships, but I also think that he should have had a chance to at least, like, not necessarily defend himself, but at least be, like, willing to learn, because once you see how, like, racist his parents are, there's all these things that Adam loves about, you know, Farai, that he is encouraging her to do, but that he's not standing up for her when he's like, maybe you shouldn't do that around my parents, which is obviously, like, super problematic, microaggression-y, racist, all sorts of shit. But I also think that there has to be, like, an acknowledgement of the environment that he grew up in, and I'm not saying it's her responsibility to educate him, but, like, obviously I'm white passing, so of course, like, my experience is completely different from someone who is, like, of a visible minority, but I am an Indigenous person, and I don't know how many friendships I have been in where somebody says something to me that is blatantly racist, but it comes from a complete lack of ignorance and understanding. And if I walked away from every relationship that happened in, I would have, like, maybe 1 or 2 friends left, and it's not their fault. And I think that there's, like, a line where I can be like, I need you to go and do this research in order to continue to be friends with you, and then if they aren't willing to put in that effort, then, like, cool, fine, draw the line there. Like, I have a certain comfortability with helping educate people on that, but, like, I also understand that, like, it's important that that's not my responsibility. And I think that's the frustrating thing too, especially considering that this is a 2-year-long relationship. I would hope that they would at least have some sort of open dialogue where they could, like, discuss and talk about this. Like, it wasn't nuanced at all. It felt very, like, reactionary in some of the responses to it, and it didn't really consider the layers both to her narrative but to his narrative as well, and, like, the dynamics of, like, healthy communication that were needed in a relationship were pretty much completely absent. Like, I totally understand if you're in a relationship where, like, the family is awful to you and, like, you don't feel like you can be yourself, then get out of that relationship. But I don't feel like we get enough from Adam to feel like he is also a racist. I think he just doesn't know how to manage his parents, and he needs to come to terms with the fact that his parents are racists. And I don't think the story gives him any voice to that experience, which is also a valid experience. So, I don't know. Obviously, we don't want to center narratives on whiteness, but I felt like this book really had an opportunity to do something very nuanced and very interesting with the dynamics of interracial relationships, and it just kind of completely missed the boat. Yeah, a bit of a big disappointment, but obviously if you want, go out and read it. It's a fairly short book and you can develop your own opinions. So this was my whiplash. I went from 5-star read to half-star read to a DNF and then to another 5-star read. So I'll talk about the DNF first. The DNF was the Dark Missions of Edgar Brim. I was really disappointed about this one because I was really looking forward to it. It's got a super cool cover. The concept was so cool. It's kind of like all these gothic monsters come to life, and they're kind of, this kid can see them and he's gonna have to, like, overcome and learn how to fight them, and it was the first book in a trilogy. I'd read books by Shane Peacock when I was younger, particularly his Boy Sherlock Holmes series, so I thought there was a lot of potential here. Then I started reading it. At the beginning, there is this character at his school who, their name's Tiger. Him and Tiger really get along really well, and then, like, through this fluke, he ends up, like, pulling off Tiger's shirt and finding out that Tiger is a girl. And things like that are frustrating, because I do understand that in the time period, like, cross-dressing is a thing in order to have access to certain privileges that weren't available to men or women. However, I also think that there is a very real danger there in erasing the stories and experiences of trans people. And the thing that made me really uncomfortable about this was there was this whole thing where he wasn't attracted to her beforehand when he was Tiger, but then after he realized that she was a girl, he started like looking at her differently. And I feel like there's like a weird thing where that happens in a lot of movies, where like a character for some reason is like disguising themselves as a man, and the movie's like, quick, we have to make this not gay. So like we have to wait until like it's revealed that they're a woman for them to show their feelings. And I'm like, dude, you're just being very homophobic, like stop. And it felt very subtly homophobic in this book, where I was like, okay, like where was this connection beforehand? It's just all of a sudden Edgar's like, oh, she's got boobs? Wow! Which, like, also to me as an ace person, I'm like, what? Like, now that you see she has curves, like, isn't it the same person? Like, how stringent is the binding techniques that she has, and can she share them with? And I think the thing that was the final straw was there was this comment where they're out in a field somewhere. The professor tells his granddaughter that she'll probably sense the villain being there beforehand, and he says that one uses everything at hand in this game, and females have powers males do not. Their wariness in the darkness is an antenna of great strength. And I'm like, are we trying to justify women having to be afraid walking down the street by themselves at night? Because no. Like, that should not be a thing that females all experience. That's just, what? Like, I don't... It was very frustrating because it was a lot of like these little microaggression-y things, and at first I thought I could brush them off, but the more it kept going, the more I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I just found like the story was kind of dragging and I wasn't really like connected to it. So I don't know, it took me a while, but I got about halfway and then I said, this is enough, like I am not wasting my time. I'm really happy I did that, because I think sometimes when you get wrapped up in really bad books, you forget that reading is supposed to be an enjoyable thing. And this book helped me rediscover that, and I'm holding it the wrong way. Oh my god. Jesus, am I that tired tonight? There we go. This is the cover. This is The Roses of May by Dot Hutchinson, which is the second book in the Collector series, the first book, which is The Butterfly Garden, and I absolutely adore this series. It is so good. One of my favorite things about Dot Hutchinson's books is she does an incredible job at recentering the narrative on the survivors. So the first book deals with this man who's the gardener who collects these women, and he tattoos butterflies on their back and then keeps them in this garden complex that he has attached to his house. And the book takes place after the complex has been blown up, the women have escaped, and the FBI is interviewing kind of one of the girls who kind of like took control and helped everyone through. He's getting her statement. This book kind of deals with like how the butterflies are like managing transitioning back into society, but it also follows this young girl, Priya, whose sister was killed by a serial killer years before, and the serial killer was never caught, and he murders one girl every spring, and it's starting to get to like spring again, and another body's gonna show up, and she's trying to like manage that. So in both cases, dealing with like the butterflies as well as Priya's experience, who's the young girl, it does a really good job at like looking at what like is left behind and like the cost of violence and crime. And I think that's something that in like the crime and the mystery genre is really concerning, is there's this narrative of like centering the story on the perpetrator of the crime, and there's a whole history of that that's like dates back to sensational fiction, but like I'm not going to get into all of that today. I wrote a whole essay on it. If you want to hear me rant about it, let me know, I'll make a video on it. But essentially that tends to silence the voices of the survivors and lead to cases where, like, for example, everyone knows Jack Ripper, no one can name any of the 5 women of the people that he killed, which is very concerning and also has a history in misogyny. But this series does a really good job at kind of flipping that narrative in a way, and as much as it's about like figuring out who the serial killer it is, it's also Priya and her mother trying to cope with, you know, I think it's 5 years past her sister's death, trying to cope with everything that's been left in that wake and kind of the ruin of like knowing that she'll never get her sister back. The other thing that's really interesting about this story is the concept of justice is talked about a lot. So Anera, who is kind of that like head butterfly who they interview in the first book, is like out living her life, and she starts writing letters to Priya because they have the same like FBI agents. That's kind of how the series are tied together. And for her, the gardener is in the hospital, and it's going to be a while before he sees trial. And then when he goes to trial, like, you know, he's really rich, so there's a chance that he could just get off into some like cushy medical facility because he's quite injured and spend the rest of his days there. And she's really struggling with having to like constantly relive her story and like wanting this chapter of her life to be done, and then like also wanting some form of justice to be served and feeling like if that happens and he kind of gets away with it, that it's not really making up for all the women that he killed. Priya is having the same conversation where she's trying to figure out, you know, is locking this man up for the rest of his life justice, and there's like a desire or a need to make someone hurt the way that she's hurting. And this is something that, like, from personal experiences in my own life, I've started to, you know, kind of grapple with, like, what is our justice system doing? Like, is it upholding the standards that it is dealing with? And, you know, how do we balance out life and the justification of taking a life, and how do we treat people who have done that? And, like, obviously our prison system needs major reform, our justice system needs major reform, but I don't really know if I have like an answer of what justice looks like anymore. And I think this book does a really good job at handling that and really putting the narrative back in the survivor's hands. Would definitely recommend that series. I think there's 2 more books in it. I can't wait to read the rest of them. I stayed up till like 3 or 4 in the morning finishing this one. But yeah, that's everything that I have for this month. I know that I've been like super spotty with videos in September. I'm really sorry. It's the whole like new job, settling back into school slump, and I'm hoping to get much more on top of things. I think I already have another video recorded that just needs to be edited and then it can go out, and I have a week off in the middle of this month, so I'm wondering about doing a how many Stephen King books can I read in a week type thing. If you have any other spooky or Halloween related content that you would like to see, please just drop me a note down below. Any book recommendations or anything else that you want to see, let me know as well. And if you have any thoughts about like splitting up channels, please also let me know, because I'm trying to figure out if it's better to gauge to the right audience to just do like a book channel and then do a bullet journal channel. But because I do a lot of bullet journaling for books that I read, I don't know if it makes sense to keep it in one space. Let me know what you prefer. If you get frustrated when I post the bullet journal videos, totally valid. Just let me know so I can make this channel work the best for all of y'all. My story graph will be linked below if you want to follow what I am reading there. I have a couple books on the go that I should be wrapping up soon, and I'm actually doing a decent job of getting pretty close to my mark for my reading goal for this year, so we'll see how that goes in the next couple months. And I will also link my art Instagram as well if you want to follow me there. I'm doing Inktober, which is also why my hands are killing me, so it'll be a rough month for my wrists. But yeah, I think that's everything. If there's anything else that you'd like to see, just let me know down below, and until the next video, stay kind.